To follow up on what Kelly was asking about regarding the baby formula shortage, you were asked earlier by a few people, I want to just ask this again with all due respect.
Yeah.
Were you able to speak with the president about when he was informed in April?
He talked about it himself. He said he was informed in April. So I don't think I need to, the president mentioned that, he said that, so I don't need to clear that up. You heard directly from the president on that.
I asked it at least as you talked yesterday about February 17th and February 18th. And what we were trying to figure out is when exactly in April was he told? Was it April 1? Was it April 30th? Was it April 15th? Somewhere else in there?
I don't have a date to share with you. What I can tell you is he spoke to this yesterday, and he said it was in April. So that matters.
Take it down a level from him
Okay.
into the staff of the White House. And part of the reason there's so much curiosity about this across town is because, as you know, there have been stories written over the last several days and weeks about how things are going here in the West Wing, how things are operating. And so when we ask who was told, either by the FDA or the Department of Health and Human Services or the USDA here in the West Wing, who was told first? How did that get from that person eventually to the president? As completely understandable. There are thousands of things going on across the federal government today.
There are thousands of things.
Here's the issue.
We were just talking about gun
Something
violence.
else could prop up suddenly as an unforeseen crisis, like this one. And so we're trying to get a sense of how do things operate here inside the West Wing and how they eventually rise to the level of presidential involvement that then lead to things like invoking the Defense Production Act 4 or 5 months after the initial flags were raised.
So, Ed, the president was briefed through his regular channels, as he is briefed on countless priorities that the President of the United States has to deal with. There are countless issues, countless priorities that I talk about here all the time, every day, about different priorities that we have to deal with, whether it's the economy, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change, whether it's foreign policy issues that we have to deal with and assess. That is how we run the White House. That's how any White House is run. So there are regular channels of White House senior staff, and that's how it gets elevated. You're asking me for a specific name. I am telling you how the process works, and I'm telling you how it goes from White House staff to regular channels to the president.
Part of why this is intriguing is because we know from what you've said, from what your colleagues have told us, from what we've learned in our reporting over the last year and a half, is that he's a voracious consumer of information from across the federal government, and whenever he gets briefed on something like this, he asks a lot of questions. And he usually puts it to the staff to come back with him with some solutions or some answers to these questions. So the idea that he was told about this in April, and then it didn't get elevated until mid-May, when Congress and when the press started raising bigger questions about this, begs the question of, well, then what happened in April when this very curious, very detail-oriented president in briefings would have been told about it, and when steps were taken that are now underway. That's part of what is so intriguing and curious about this situation, and why we're so desperate for information, because normally in these situations we're told, oh, well, here's what he wanted to know, and here's who he tasked with doing it. But we're not getting that this time.
No, look, we've laid out timelines over and over again.
Well, you gave us 2 dates.
Well,
And then tell us generally in April he was told about it.
okay, so by late, let me try again. Let's try this again. By late in April, sales were going down and shortages were appearing. So that is what we learned in late April. And since then, through May, across the administration, we've aggressively invoked the DPA and used it 3 times, as you just mentioned, and that's because of the president's leadership. Launched Operation Fly Formula, again, because of the president's leadership. Secured 80 million safe infant formula bottles from other countries, and cut red tape and issued WIC waivers in all 50 states. Because that's what happened in April that triggered our involvement in the way that we did throughout May in doing these 4 very specific things. Look, USDA, they took immediate action But USDA and FDA cut red tape and increased supply. A reminder, there was more supply on the market after the recall than prior. That didn't happen by accident. So these actions were designed to bridge demand while Abbott worked through its safely open and manufacture a product that met FDA's gold standard. So they were acting at USDA, FDA were acting from the moment that the recall happened. But again, the sales were going down and shortages were appearing in late April, and that's when
That's what he was told?
well, he said in late April, right? And this is
He said April.
in April. I'm sorry, in April. Okay, he said in April, in early April. The point that I'm making is what we started to see in April were sales were going down and shortages were appearing. And when that happened, we triggered, the president made sure that the DPA happened, the Operation Fly formula happened, and that was our focus there. We wanted to make sure we got as much supply out as possible because, again, we saw the sales were going down.